Housing Act 2004, a piece of legislation was brought in called Tenancy Deposit Protection. And this legislation was enacted in April 2007 and meant anybody taking a deposit on an assured short-hold tenancy in England and Wales had to make sure it's protected with one of the schemes that are approved by the government.
Or you rent a property, you may need to pay a deposit to cover any damage you may cause during your tenancy. But parting with your money doesn't mean you won't see it again. Your landlord has to make sure your deposit is protected. New deposits must be put into a government-approved scheme within 30 days, so your money will be secure until you move out. You can use Shelter's online checker to see if your deposit has been protected, but your landlord must also write to you with the name of the scheme they are using and give you a signed tenancy deposit certificate. When you are ready to move in, make sure your landlord signs an inventory listing the property's contents. Make a note of any existing damage and, if possible, take photos. When you want to move out, check your home's contents against the inventory. Pay all your bills and clean thoroughly before you leave. Your landlord can only keep your deposit for damage or unpaid rent. Otherwise, you should receive it back within 10 days, but it can take a couple of weeks.
Benefit from our online service, and they get guidance from all the documents that we produce, and we make sure that we promote and become the voice of authority in making sure tenants are not disadvantaged when it comes to claiming back their deposit after the tenancy has ended. If one of the parties wants to bring a dispute to TDS within 3 months of the tenancy lawfully ending, they can benefit from our free alternative dispute resolution process, so our adjudicators can decide how the deposit should be distributed based on the evidence that the parties provide.
It's pretty common knowledge these days that a landlord has to protect the deposit. It is a legal requirement, okay? If he's not protected your deposit, as I said, the landlord's acted unlawfully, has left himself open really to a claim for compensation. You can make a claim in small claims court against your landlord. Compensation can be up to 3 times your deposit. The court makes that decision, but it can be up to 3 times your deposit plus your deposit back.
The landlord can only withhold your deposit for any financial loss incurred as a result of your tenancy.
You can use Shelter's online checker to see if your deposit has been protected, but your landlord must also write to you with the name of the scheme they are using and give you a signed tenancy deposit certificate.
It doesn't matter what you call it if it's what the obligations are and what the purpose of that sum of money is. So if the purpose is that it might not go back or it will be refunded back to the tenant at the end of the tenancy, then, as I say, it doesn't matter what you call it, it's a deposit. Now, there's one other thing just to stress on that point. A landlord doesn't have to take a deposit, and if a landlord chooses not to, they don't need to comply with the Tenancy Deposit Protection Scheme regulations. Take a deposit and you've got the tenancy agreement signed in January, even though it's not due to start until, say, September, the clock starts ticking in January. It doesn't have to be the full amount of the deposit, it could be a partial payment, etc., etc. Remember that 30 days starts ticking from that point, so get it protected. Protection of the deposit is really, really important, but don't forget you've got prescribed information scheme leaflets to worry about. Lots of landlords that I see at various events up and down the country, they're getting to grips with protecting the deposit, but when you mention prescribed information, it's like I'm talking a foreign language. So if you're taking a deposit, protection, yes. Prescribed information, don't forget it, because the statutory penalty applies if you don't serve prescribed information. And also, depending on what scheme you use, you may have to serve a scheme leaflet alongside it, and that forms part of the PI.